Alright YouTube, so we are back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII / Remake. It is currently spooky season. It is Halloween today, so I figured for today's video, we'd go over the scary, spooky, whatever moments you want to call them from Final Fantasy VII, the original game, of course. Now, I use spooky, scary with air quotes, because obviously it's a turn-based RPG. It's not really any actual scary moments. It's not a horror game by any means. But there are some pretty shocking moments. Some obvious examples of this are, for one, the Genova escape in the Shinra building. If you're playing this game up to this point, right, you're brand new, you're a kid in the 90s, you don't know shit about this game. It's such a shocking reveal when you wake up in the jail cell and there's a blood trail and dead bodies all throughout the building. This is so much darker than anything you've seen up to this point in the game. And really, it's not even just up to this point. This is definitely one of the darker moments overall in the game. If this was with modern graphics, all the dead bodies everywhere, the amount of blood everywhere, pretty graphic. Another good example actually comes from this segment of the game as well, and it's the Genova reveal within the cell. That kind of comes out of nowhere. Your character just walks to the glass, looks in there, and you're seeing this, headless, eyeball, nipple, alien thing. And if you're not prepared for it, it's pretty shocking. Now, when it comes to this video, again, we're looking at the scarier moments of Final Fantasy VII. The video itself isn't in any particular order, but we're also kind of looking towards the future, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 and beyond. And hopefully with some, if not all of these areas, they deliver. Now, a good handful of these that I have written down are in and around Nibelheim, so I figured we'd probably start with these. First one being, of course, the Nibelheim incident. Even in the original game, though it's PlayStation 1, and there's not really a whole lot of NPCs that you see die on screen anyways, conceptually it's still a pretty tragic moment. You have Sephiroth killing an entire village of people. This is one of the instances in the game that can be made a lot darker when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, just like everything else that we're going to talk about in this video, depending on how far they want to push it. How much do they want to show of Sephiroth killing everybody in Nibelheim? Especially Cloud's mom. I feel like that's going to be a pretty serious moment. I feel like we're actually going to potentially get to see some aspect of that. I don't know if they're going to show him actually stabbing Claudia, or Cloud getting to hold his dying mother in his arms, or something like that. I don't know if they're going to go that far. I mean, we've already got to see a POV shot of Cloud looking at his burning house that has his mother inside of it. Now, whether or not this is an actual memory or just something being shown to Cloud by Sephiroth, obviously we don't know. And also, the quote that Sephiroth gives Cloud in the alleyway, "Run away, you have to leave, you have to live," has been confirmed through interviews and stuff that that's actually something Cloud's mom said. And I'm thinking when it comes to Remake Part 2, whenever Cloud's given the calm flashback story, that we're going to get maybe some more segments with Claudia before Sephiroth actually kills everybody. That makes it a lot more tragic, and if we actually get to see Claudia die on screen, it's going to make it hit even harder. The next sort of creepy thing when it comes to Nibelheim is the Shinra Manor / mansion, the very standard looking haunted house setting, dirt, cobwebs, scary monsters, a possible vampire dude in the basement. This is a segment of the game that I'm definitely looking forward to when it comes to Remake potentially Part 2, depending on how far we go into the next game. I hope they handle it right. I hope it's similar to the train graveyard in Remake Part 1. Now, that wasn't actually scary or creepy, but it was still atmospherically pretty damn cool. And it's definitely scarier or creepier or just better in general than the original train graveyard, which was, nothing. And this one I didn't even have written down, but the town of Nibelheim itself could be considered a little bit creepy, especially after the calm flashback when you get the whole backstory. You know that Sephiroth killed everybody, the town was burned to the ground. You and Tifa remember that. But then you arrive in Nibelheim later on in the game, and it looks perfectly normal. So they handled this segment of the game correctly with the Sephiroth clones walking around town, talking about reunion, and the Shinra employees trying to fill in and pretend like it's a normal town. It could be a little bit creepy. And the last area when it comes to Nibelheim that could be considered a little bit spooky or creepy would be Mount Nibel, but more specifically the Mount Nibel Reactor. Now, the mountain itself, they could do a little bit of creepy vibe with it, with the different caves, the jagged rocks, the darkness, the fog, the wooden bridges that tend to break. But it's once you get inside the reactor where things take a pretty dark turn. You have all these chambers around there that Cloud eventually looks into, and you see this mutant inside, which is called a Machinoid, which are humans that Hojo has been experimenting on, exposing them to a shitload of condensed maca, which is what turned them into these monsters. We actually get to see one fall out of one of these chambers and eventually die. I always thought the Machinoid had a really cool design. I believe when it comes to Remake, the unknown entity / failed experiment are supposed to be something like Machinoids, or maybe they're straight up Machinoids, but they don't look anywhere near as cool. But even beyond just this, we have the actual body of Genova here, at least in the past during the Nibelheim incident. This is where Tifa's dad dies at in the reactor. Tifa gets fucked up by Sephiroth. Zack and Cloud both get injured and taken prisoner by Hojo and experimented on for a couple years. We've pretty much covered every segment of Nibelheim, man. From the past to the present and just the location in general. Everything about Nibelheim has potential for them to do something really, really cool with, and I hope to God they do. This next one's a bit of a quick one. It's not itself all that scary in the original Final Fantasy VII, though being followed around by a giant shadowy snake that's probably going to kick your ass could be a little scary, but it's a potential for what they could do with Remake. Like, if they turn this into an actual swampy forest location that we go through, and maybe periodically as we're going through the area, we see something big or massive in the background that we just barely can catch a sight of, just run by the tree line, or maybe we hear something behind us constantly as we're getting through here, and eventually fight the Midgard at the end, they could turn it into a bit of a creepy location. Next up, we have the Cave of the Ghee, or the Sealed Cave, which itself, similar to like Mount Nibel, the setting is a bit creepy. It's a cave filled with a bunch of malevolent spirits of the Ghee tribe. But there's one particular moment within this cave that, at least in the original game, was legitimately a frightening moment. And it's whatever the fuck that was, my dudes. This is definitely one of like the freakier moments of the original Final Fantasy VII. It takes you by such surprise. Like, if you're not prepared for it, you don't know it's going to happen. This face on screen all of a sudden starts moving, because that's probably where your focal point is. It's what you're looking at. You're waiting for the boss fight. You're waiting to whatever's going to happen in this moment. And that face all of a sudden moves and laughs and shit. Like, it just takes you by such surprise. So I'm very curious how they're going to handle that when it comes to Remake, if they're going to do anything remotely like that, or a callback to that moment by any means. But also the setting stuff. Again, this cave has, what if it's red water, lava, whatever the fuck it is. Floor traps, spider webs, giant spider enemies. They can do all kinds of things with this location. And lastly for this video, we have the Sunken Gelnica, which is a crashed plane in the ocean. You need a submarine to get to it. It's an entirely optional location when it comes to the original Final Fantasy VII, but it has some of the hardest enemies in the entire original game, and they're also kind of terrifying enemies. They're all like genetically engineered monsters that whenever the plane crashes, they're let loose. That's why you're fighting them. And they all just have unique designs. There's obviously some pretty cool, unique designs throughout all of Final Fantasy VII, but these definitely stand out amongst a lot of the other random enemies throughout the game. But given the setting and the type of enemies that are on board, they could definitely do some sort of creepy shit with it. It's even creepy in the original game. It's already like partially flooded and stuff like that. The only thing is, when it comes to Remake, we don't know for sure whether or not we're going to get to experience this location, simply because we have no idea if there's going to be any kind of free roam travel. We don't know if we're going to have access to the submarine in Remake. Even if we get something like the submarine, is it just going to be something we can go across the ocean in, or can we actually dive and go around the bottom of the ocean and visit locations like we can in the original FF7? We just have no idea. This is one of those locations that I really hope is in Remake, just because I have a lot of like nostalgia for it, because it's one that I've always remembered. As a kid, when I barely even knew anything about the game, I just loved playing it. I always remembered this like underwater something, boat, ship, plane, whatever it was that you could go and visit. And I always had just a bit of an attachment to this location, even though as a kid when I came here, I was probably getting my ass kicked. Anyways, my dudes, that'll pretty much do it for this video. We didn't cover everything that could be considered a little bit creepy when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. You have the Temple of the Ancients. You know, when they modernized that for Remake, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do with that. And pretty much anything with Hojo. When Hojo's involved, there's a creep factor. But of course, I want to pass it off to you guys. When it comes to the original Final Fantasy VII, what moments do you find to be a little bit scary? Maybe at least as a kid, the first time you played the game, what kind of maybe was a little bit scary to you? And also, what are you looking forward to when it comes to the future games? What I want, like the absolute minimum when it comes to the stuff that we talked about in this video, is atmosphere. I hope they at least nail the atmosphere of these locations where it's supposed to feel a little bit creepy. I'm not saying they need to go full horror, though that would be pretty damn cool. I just want it to like feel like a creepy location, even if nothing creepy actually happens. Either way, dudes, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't interested in more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn all my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. I'm a Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.